Overwatch can be a difficult game to digest and understand, which makes it hard to look at your own gameplay or the gameplay of your team and actually identify the root causes of issues instead of just pointing out the simple mistakes. So I'm going to start doing a quick series about the analysis methods and techniques that make it much easier to read a player's gameplay in a way that's actually useful for the purpose of improving. I'll try and focus mostly on the perspective of analysing your own gameplay or doing a one-on-one, but all of this is applicable for looking at 6v6 gameplay too. So when it comes to analysing gameplay, the first concept we need to understand is this idea of mindset. What do we mean when talking about a player's mindset? Simply, it's just everything going through that player's head as they go into the next fight, before they've committed to a play or a position. This mindset will decide the positions a player takes, it'll decide their plan for the fight, where they put their attention, and so on. It's a lens through which we can view all the decisions made by the player, and even the actions the player does automatically. This mindset will change from fight to fight as the in-game situation changes. Maybe an enemy DPS swaps to Widow, maybe the friendly Zarya has a Grav. We'd expect our mindset, the thing that's guiding them on how to play their hero in the upcoming fight, to adapt to the new situation. And by looking at the player's mindset each fight, we can turn basic analysis of mistakes not only into something that will help find core issues, but more importantly into something much better suited to a proactive style of feedback, where instead of just pointing out little micro mistakes, we can build a discussion about the wider issues that are setting you or your team up to fail. If you've watched anything of mine before, you'll know I'm always going on about how when we see something go wrong in game, the mistake already happened, 10, 15 seconds ago. And this is exactly what I mean by mindset. The player's mindset is deciding if they're in a good position to make a play, is deciding if they're ready to commit to that play as soon as they have the opportunity. Because mindset isn't just about the macro 6v6 gameplay, it's about everything the player does, including the duels. People talk a lot about how mechanics win duels, which obviously is true, but they often forget that it's more about how to make that mechanical test as easy as possible. If you're expecting an enemy player, you'll react faster. If you're remembering to save an important cooldown or forcing the duel in a comfortable position, you'll have the advantage. Your mindset is what sets you up to either win or lose these duels. So to analyse a player's mindset, we can split it into two parts. The first has to do with mentality, the second to do with understanding. Mentality is pretty simple, it's just everything outside of the gameplay that's affecting the player's judgment. Sometimes there's not much here to look at, but it's something we always have to give respect to when analysing a player's decisions. For example, confidence is going to affect gameplay. Maybe a player's on a win streak, maybe they just feel like the enemy team is bad. It might lead to risky plays and peaks that aren't worth over-analysing unless it's a consistent issue. Same goes for underconfidence. Maybe a player's been losing all day, maybe they're getting flamed by teammates about the previous fight. It's going to have a tangible effect on their gameplay and decision making. A player's mentality also affects things like how well they communicate with their teammates, whether they're working out solutions and forming plans and so on. There's not a huge amount to say here without specific examples. For now I just want to make it clear that each fight we have to consider how the player's mentality affects their mindset. Not just because a huge number of player issues are mentality related, but also because we don't want to waste time analysing or explaining gameplay mistakes when the root cause of the issue lies with their mentality. The main part of the mindset concept is that understanding part, and this is just everything to do with a player's understanding of the current in-game situation. How well do they understand the comp matchup and how the two teams are going to play into each other? How well do they understand the ult situation and the way that both teams are probably going to use their ults? How well do they understand the map geometry, the best positions, the best place for their team to take a fight, and so on? And how well do they understand how their hero slots into all of that? There's a huge amount that you could talk about here for each fight, but we have to make sure that we're focusing on the most important things each fight and not overwhelming ourselves or our team with endless analysis of minutiae that don't really have much of an effect on the fight. To do this, typically when we're considering whether the player's mindset is a good one for the situation, it's easiest to start with the comp matchup, making sure that we're happy with a rough idea of how the two team comps will want to play into each other in that section of the map. A monkey comp and a Rhine comp will want to play in different ways, and that playstyle will further change based on what high grounds or cover are available. Then we want to look at the ultimate situation, which should let us predict how the upcoming fight will go down. The monkey comp might have ults like Nanoblade, the Rhine comp might have ults like Sound Barrier. We can use the ultimate matchup combined with the comp matchup to get a decent idea of what plays each team has at their disposal. Once we've thought about how the fight will be likely to go down in the 6v6, we can think more about individual plays and positions, and importantly, where each player might want to put their attention. This aspect of mindset might be simple things like saving Trance for Grav, or a Tracer hiding to pounce on the backline, or an Ana Brig duo remembering to use the synergy of their heroes to deny that Tracer flank. It could also be more complicated too. For example, a Lucio playing up against an EMP might decide on a call to speed boost in and take an early fight to disrupt the enemy's EMP setup. A player only has a certain amount of attention and resources each fight. Their mindset will decide where those things go, and it's up to us when analysing gameplay to decide whether their attention and resources could be put to better use. When looking at those actions a player takes, we always want to prioritise creativity and proactive plays in our analysis or feedback. Every fight we want to see if a change in player mindset could result in them making a play, supporting a play, or disrupting an enemy play. We want to avoid the mindset of autopiloting and spamming down main waiting for the fight to start as much as possible. Even if you look at a situation and decide there weren't many options, it's still helping you or the player think creatively about the opportunities your hero gives you, and especially in competitive, creativity wins games. As a final thing, when we're looking at this aspect of mindset, it's important to remember that these are decisions the player is making mid-game. They don't have the same information as we do in replay, and they don't have the same amount of time as we do to digest that information. So we don't want to go overboard on trying to work out the perfect play in the micro. We just want to use the clear signals, like the comp matchup and the ultimate situation, to predict what plays we have open to us. This loops back to the mentality part of mindset, and we have to give respect to it when analysing gameplay. If we want to teach ourselves or our players to build the type of mindset that lets them quickly recognise opportunities for proactive plays, we have to keep things simple enough that the thought processes involved in this can become automatic. So just a quick recap before we start looking at examples. Mindset is a core concept that we always have to consider when analysing a player's gameplay. It controls everything the player does, the positions they take in pre-fight, the things they're ready to react to, the places they're putting their attention and resources, and so on. Basic analysis of mistakes where you point out what did and didn't work isn't usually very helpful. We aren't interested in what the player actually does, we're interested in what caused them to do it. By looking at the player's actions and figuring out their mindset, we can actually find gaps in the player's understanding and help improve that mindset for the future. Simply put, it's a way of framing a player's gameplay to make sure that we're focused on the important things. There's also a second concept that combines with mindset to give a very strong foundation to your analysis, and it's this idea of critical moments. The next video will go over this concept in more detail, but I'll run over it quickly since I'll be referring to it throughout the examples. Critical moments are basically any mechanical test or duel that affects the game. Does Widow hit a headshot? Does D.Va deny an enemy soldier taking high ground? Does Brig whipshot a diving monkey? Or does Tracer win a skirmish for map control? The game is full of these critical moments, and you need to win them to win fights. They connect with mindset because a good mindset will give you more critical moments and so more chances to win the fight, and it will also make those moments easier, since your mindset will put you in good positions for them, make you ready to react to them, and so on, basically making them less risky and less mechanically demanding. If you're consistently failing your critical moments, the answer usually lies with your mindset. Typically when analysing gameplay, you'll look for those critical moments and then build off of them to find the issues with mindset that made that particular moment so difficult. So taking a few examples from the grand finals between Shanghai and Atlanta, I'm not going to go super in depth on each situation, I just want to show how the concept of mindset can be used as a lens through which we can analyse the player's decisions. So let's try and figure out the rough mindset for each team this fight. Remember, this is an open concept. We're not nailing ourselves to a specific plan or exact win condition. We're just figuring out the guiding playstyle of the team that each player can adapt to fit their hero depending on where in the map the fight is happening. And that's kind of what I want to draw attention to with this example, that with the correct mindset, plans more or less make themselves. Looking at these two comps, the matchup is pretty simple. Shanghai have a comp that relies on taking alternate angles and burning their enemy down with range spam to the point where they can push in and engage to clean up the fight. Atlanta, on the other hand, are playing a fairly standard rush comp. They want to look to speed boost around the map and try to catch enemies, or get into a position where they can use the objective to force the enemy into a brawl. Playing against each other, we can imagine that Atlanta will want to use cover to get close to Shanghai, then try to speed boost out with ultimates to catch them. It's up to Shanghai to disrupt or negate that speed boost with whatever else they have, then engage onto Atlanta once Atlanta start to run out of resources. Looking at the ults, we can see that Shanghai is close to Flux and Trance, but will need some time to spam and build them. This means they don't have the means to disrupt Atlanta's speed boost just yet, and will need to focus on kiting out Atlanta until they have the ults that will let them re-engage. Atlanta have window and are close to sound barrier, but because of the comp matchup, it's not really going to affect their playstyle. We just expect to see Iris using his window as soon as he sees the opportunity. Because of this section of the map, we can imagine that Shanghai will push up and spam Atlanta to build ults, then continue to fall back and kite out until they have those ults to re-engage with. Atlanta also know that they need to contest the cart around the bookstore to have a chance at a second retake fight towards the end of streets, so we expect the fight to go down somewhere around here. From this we have a good idea of the mindset that we want both teams to be in. Shanghai need to be in the mindset that means they don't get caught until they have the ults. Atlanta needs to be in a mindset that means they commit to closing distance quickly, both so that they don't get spammed too much, and to make sure they get to cart in time to secure a second fight. They also need to be ready to ruthlessly commit on any member of Shanghai they think they can catch. Any hesitation, for example from Iris with his BAP window, will be a sign that Atlanta aren't in the correct mindset. So if we focus on Shanghai, let's think about how each player can adapt this mindset to fit their hero. Ball and Tracer know that their team won't be ready to engage until they have the ults, so they should be focusing on reserving their health pools and cooldowns until that happens, while staying in a good position to engage from. Ashe, Bap, and Zen will want to continue spamming Atlanta as they approach, but make sure they kite out the speed boost and are ready to re-engage with Sigma's Flux. Since Zen is close to Trance, we also expect him to call to his team that he has it, and will likely commit to a more aggressive position because of it. Sigma is pretty similar. Build the Flux, kite Atlanta's engage, call the timing of the re-engage. The overall comp matchup and ult situation gives us a good idea of the team's mindset, and we can adapt that mindset to fit the individual heroes. Now looking at how this fight goes, we can see that all of Shanghai understand this mindset perfectly. They kite out Atlanta's engage, then all match their timings on the re-engage. I want to stress that although comms were important here, that's mostly just to match the timings of the engage. There isn't enough time or room in comms to craft a play like this mid-game. It was Shanghai's understanding of the situation that meant each player was in the right mindset to be able to pull off this play almost automatically. Each player was just doing what best suited their hero for the situation. If Tracer had wasted her blinks and recall before the engage, or Sigma tried to hold his position on cart, there would have been an issue with their mindset that there wouldn't have been enough time to fix using comms, and because of that, we wouldn't have seen Shanghai pull off such a clean play. Let's check another example, but focus mostly on Kai's perspective. Here, I want to draw attention to how when looking at a player's actions through the lens of their mindset, it helps us avoid wasting time by over-analysing their micro. Here, Atlanta are about to attack first point King's Row, and have a decent counter-comp to Shanghai's dive. Similar to the first example, Shanghai are relying on poke damage from their backline to create an opening for their flankers to engage onto, at which point we'd also expect the backline to start pushing in. However, Atlanta are playing a Bat Brig double shield that wants to open corners using shields and range spam to safely clear angles and force enemies to hide. Once those angles are cleared, they can leapfrog forward spamming away until they win fights through poke, or get close enough to push onto the enemies hiding in cover in order to close out the fight. The comp also has a lot of threat against dive heroes. The sustain of all of these heroes together mean it's difficult for the dive heroes to one-shot anyone. Once those dive heroes engage, they'll also be under a huge amount of threat from things like Erisipal, Sigrock, Brig stuns, Torp turrets, and Hanzo headshots. Atlanta just has to hit one of those things to force out the divers. Playing against each other, we'd expect Atlanta to open the angles with shields and use their spam to force Shanghai's ranged heroes to hide. If they're able to deny the bulk of the damage from their enemies Zen, Bap, and Sig, Shanghai will never have the opening they need to be able to dive in and delete someone on Atlanta. And we know that if they don't get the one-shot, the sustain from Atlanta and the threat versus the dive heroes will force those divers out fast, at which point Atlanta can simply push forward onto Shanghai's poke heroes. Looking at the map positions, we'd expect Shanghai to try and force a dive somewhere around the statue, since it gives their poke heroes decent angles and their dive heroes decent staging positions. And they also don't want to allow Atlanta to get all the way through the choke and start spreading out to control the angles. Since it's first fight, there's no ultimates, and we'd expect both teams' mindsets to reflect this default more or less exactly. So if we think about Kai and what we'd like his mindset to be, based on the matchup and the fact he's on Hanzo, His job is pretty simple. We want him to open the angles slowly with his team, spamming towards the enemy backline heroes to try and kill them or deny their damage. As his team pushes forward, a dive from Shanghai is inevitable, and since he's the squishiest hero on the team, he's likely to be the target. When that dive happens, he needs to be ready for it. We want him to focus on surviving the initial engage by grouping up to get peel from his team, and also to help force out the divers. Once that happens, he can then spread back out and go back to spamming the backline. Watching this through, we can see this is almost exactly what he does. He comes out of spawn and spams towards the backline, helping to deny almost all potential damage from Bap and Zen. Then once he starts to get pressured, he's ready to group with his team to accept healing and peel, then helps repulse the dive and goes back to zoning the backline. We can see that because he's in the correct mindset for the situation, he doesn't hesitate with any of this. The important thing about this example is at no point do we need to go in depth about the exact positions or specific game plan he should take. The decisions he made, climbing onto the bus, using Sonic on the backline, double jumping to his team, all of that was done automatically because of the mindset he was in. If he didn't do some of these things, maybe he took a more vulnerable position or wasted his double jump and so got caught by the dive. It's much more useful to talk about that from a mindset perspective than just isolating the specific mistake. Because we don't care what exact position he's in, we only care that he's in a mindset that means he's ready for the dive. If he's ready for the dive, he'll automatically take a position that lets him double jump to his team. And this is why mindset is such a useful concept, because it can teach things in a way that's applicable to every similar situation. It doesn't have to be Kings Row first, and it doesn't have to be that comp matchup. All the player would have to recognize is that when playing a backline hero versus dive and pushing through a choke, they need to remember to be ready for the dive. This way of thinking also helps us find gaps in player knowledge much easier. If they didn't understand the matchup, or didn't know how to predict when the dive is likely to come in, or even didn't know which positions would be good to take, using the structure of mindset to analyze the player's actions will show which mental issue or which gap in understanding caused the problems in the first place. Not only does this save heaps of time, if you're a coach, it'll also help build respect with the players you're working with. No player wants to listen to a coach going on and on about micro to do with the hero that player already knows how to play. They just want to be taught how to adapt their playstyle to fit that situation. In this final example, I want to show how using mindset to look at pre-fight can help build the creative and proactive attitudes needed to recognize opportunities and play at the fast tempo required to be a good player. Here, Atlanta have just lost first point and are looking to retake in streets. Comps-wise, Shanghai have a Zen Brig dive comp. They're looking to control flanks and force the enemy to group up, where they can hit them with spam and soft dives until they have the ultimates or openings they need to fully commit. Atlanta are playing a comp similar to the last double shield, but it's a bit more brawl focused. Depending on the situation, they could try to anchor in a strong position and catch the enemy engages, or they could rotate around the map and try to catch enemies with Orisa pulls and range spam. Playing into each other, we expect Shanghai to play their default of skirmishing until they have the ults to hard commit, and ideally Atlanta will play a mix of their two options. They can rotate together to clear out Shanghai from certain areas of the map until they either find a strong enough position to anchor in, or they have an opportunity to actually push onto a member of Shanghai using their Orisa pull. Ults-wise, Shanghai will probably be able to build everything in the upcoming fight, while Atlanta only have Window and maybe a Bongo. But it's not all bad, as Atlanta have a chance to go for 2 fights before the end of the map. As long as they build some ults and force some enemy ults in the first fight, even if they lose it, their second fight will be a lot more equal. So thinking about the matchup, the ults, and the map, we'd expect Atlanta to be in the mindset of both contesting cart before it gets too far, and disrupting Shanghai's setup, since Shanghai has the ult advantage and will easily win the fight if they're allowed to use their ults the way they want to. If Atlanta are in that mindset, it's very easy for them to be creative and make a play. Once they come out of third point and Shanghai aren't there, they have a load of time to make a rotation around the left and play for cart control. We can imagine them pushing up and around, being ready to use Orisa pull and even Bap window to try and burst whoever's pushing cart. Then they could anchor around the cart and force Shanghai to burn their ults and their time bank to win the fight, putting Atlanta in a great position for the final fight that will decide the map. I want to stress that this is actually a very simple play, and based on the comps, the ults, and the cart position, it's one of the only things that makes sense. Yet, since Atlanta weren't in the right mindset going into the fight, they either don't recognize the potential for this play or aren't proactive enough to seize the opportunity while it's there. Instead, we see Atlanta hesitate on the corner for way too long, with Gator almost absent-mindedly anchoring on a corner that gives the team no cover to back up to and no potential to disrupt Shanghai's play. This inaction allows Shanghai all the time they need, not just to set up a clean fight with their ults, but also to build the EMP in the first place. And although Atlanta don't get fully team-wiped, they don't force out enough ults from Shanghai or build enough of their own to get a good second fight, and instead just get continually staggered until they lose the map. Now, I don't want to read super deep into this fight or speculate about the issues Atlanta was having. I just want to focus on how Atlanta's poor mindset paralyzed them from recognizing and seizing the opportunity that they had. If their mindset had better suited the situation based on the comps and the ults, it would have been easy to be creative and find a way to take the fight. And although it might not seem like Atlanta had a huge amount of time in which to make the rotation that we talked about, if they were in that mindset, they would have spotted the option far earlier and been ready to commit to it faster. Without a good mindset, there is no readiness or willingness to commit, which is what causes the missed opportunities like this one. And we can look at individual plays from this perspective too. A player seizing an opportunity to go for an aggressive ultimate, or take a position that's open, or even call for an engage like the one we just talked about that can disrupt the enemy setup completely. It's a player's mindset that decides whether they're being creative and recognizing these opportunities, and especially decides whether they're ready to commit to them without hesitation. Creativity wins games and hesitation loses them. Analyzing your or another player's actions through the lens of their mindset is a great way to build your understanding of the creative options that you have open to you. One final thing is that this is also a great way to build confidence in yourself or the player you're working with. If you're looking at gameplay just in terms of mistakes, all it'll do is give them feedback that's too complicated to be actionable in-game, and it'll also make them too afraid to take risks. By shifting our perspective to be based around mindset, we're allowing the player to carry on playing their hero in an intuitive way. We're just teaching them how to adapt it to best fit the situation based on the comps, the ults, and the map. It means our players' focus can be put on being proactive and actually trying to win fights, rather than just giving them a checklist on how not to lose them. To put the whole thing simply, a player's mindset is everything that guides their actions as they go into the fight, both their active decisions and their automatic ones. Good mindsets will lead to good positions and playstyles for that fight. Poor ones will lead to bad positions or low fight impact. If we use mindset as that lens to analyze gameplay, it helps find the gaps in understanding that are actually causing the issues to begin with. Hopefully that's a decent introduction to the concept. It can seem a bit naked without the critical moments part, but we'll talk about that next time. For now, try looking at any gameplay. Pro stuff might be easier because it's more structured, but look at your own gameplay as well, and try and find some of those failed critical moments. Maybe a player loses a duel or an ultimate gets wasted, and think about how the mindset of that player could be adjusted to make them more likely to automatically make the better play, make them more ready to react to developments in the fight, or make them more likely to recognize and commit to creative opportunities. I'm hoping to make more videos outlining these types of concepts and the way I like to see and coach the game, so please let me know if you've got any questions or ideas.